Look who's back. The famous Gord McGill. Man out there
Uh,
making a name for himself. How you doing, buddy?
I'm all right. I write a few things here and there. I don't know. I guess some well-placed individuals have been paying attention, and I don't know. Every once in a while, they throw me a couple $100 to write something, so I do it.
That works, man. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, you you got the Blaze published you wrote an open letter to Doge. If people can't tell, both Gord and I are both it's first thing in the morning for both of us. So bear with us. We're gonna drag our ass through this, but we know what we're doing. We're pros. So
And both truckers. I mean, you're still on the road. I'm kind of sidelined at the moment, but yeah, brothers of the road.
yeah. So we you wrote an open letter to Doge, uh, and that caught some people's attention. You ended up going on Fox, and you were published in the Blaze. So tell me about that article and what your purpose was, what you look to accomplish. I know you've been on this journey, so to speak, of defending truckers' rights, I guess you would call it, or wages, or however you want to,
Well,
tackle that.
I don't know if I would necessarily say I'm defending their rights. It's just that, I've been doing this a long time, and, I like to take a 30,000 foot view of things. And there's a lot of problems in the trucking industry, and the industry itself and its supposed leaders, much like leaders in other areas of life, the government, the media, they only scratch the surface of what's causing some problems, and they seem really reluctant to go deep on what's actually happening. So, um, I started a Substack here a couple of years ago, and previous to that, I'd been asked to write a couple things for Newsweek, and I'm just, I don't know. I guess maybe as our friend Charles Haywood likes to say, "Cometh the man, cometh the hour." Um, it just seems like the trucking industry is at this, like, inflection point where there's so much bad stuff happening to it, and it's a shambles. And I'm very happy to offer, I guess, my take on it. And for the most part, it's resonated with people. That particular piece, the Doge thing, um, it was just an opportunity, like, if these guys are serious about, trying to reform the state, I wanna offer some things that can reform in the trucking business that will save the taxpayer a lot of money, and also improve the lives and material conditions of truck drivers. So, one of the things I've been speaking about now for years is this sort of stealth corporate welfare program that sort of undergirds a major problem in trucking, which is its retention problem. We're always sort of cycling through drivers, and only diehards, crusty bastards like you and myself stick with it. And then there's just like an endless parade of, people coming in and out of the business who maybe shouldn't be there. And a lot of that's financed by the taxpayer. And the government and the people who are living on this welfare program are able to get away with it because they're lying to themselves about what's actually going on here. And so I'm very happy to point out those lies. And I suggested it to the Doge. I'm like, look, this might be one cut amongst thousands and a very tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the profligate waste that the government goes through all the time. But, one less cut backs us that much further away from impending doom.
Hmm.
So that resonated with some people. And then also, the way trucking is regulated by, the federal DOT, state DOTs, and the FMCSA. Um, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. They spend an awful lot of money on, you know electronic surveillance technologies and the implementation of such, and inspecting trucks and hassling guys on the side of the road, and everyone's hair is on fire about truck accidents and nuclear verdicts. And the problem is that they're doing a rearguard action of enforcement after letting people on the road with CDLs who should have never got them, or maybe could have used a lot more training. And by having an extremely low barrier to entry to get your license, and an extremely low barrier to entry to start a trucking company, which I'm not necessarily against. Like I still sort of believe in certain free market principles. However, with the safety factor involved, and the fact that the roads, who will build the roads are still public and still managed by the state, and they are not doing their job with ensuring that the guys operating on them know what they're doing, and all of their enforcement efforts are focused on having already let the horses out of the barn, so to speak. I'm saying close the door and make sure the horses coming out are in good shape. They are out there trying to enforce that after they're already out in the paddock. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I guess that yeah, the Blaze thing. I had pitched them, a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine write for the Blaze, and they suggested me to the Blaze's editors as somebody who could possibly contribute something to them, and myself and the Blaze agreed on a piece about this political prisoner situation in Canada, and how Trump could leverage this, unknown problem in Canada, and bully Trudeau about it in any negotiations between the two countries. And this has some resonances with the January 6 guys. And as that piece was being edited and we were going back and forth with it, this guy at the Blaze, Matt Himes, was looking through my Substack and saw this piece I wrote to the Doge on my Substack, and was kind of like I don't want to say it was a throwaway thing, but like I sat down and wrote that in like an afternoon. I was just
Right.
like, the muse hit me, and they really liked it. They're like, hey, can we, publish this? Can we take this from your Substack and adjust it for the Blaze? And I was like, sure. And then when I went out on the and yeah, Fox Business asked me to come on and talk about it, and then the Blaze's own YouTube channel wanted me to come on and talk about it, and I had another extra 15 minutes of fame there for a couple of days.
Well, this is something you and I have talked about. I think the last time you were on the show, we talked about, this exact topic. This is something that you've been looking at for a couple of years now and really been paying close attention to. And, I've had kids that I work with ask me about driving truck because they know I've been driving for a long time. I'm like, look, man, I'm not over the road for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is my wife wanted me to come home, obviously, and that's great. But the other reason is I make more money driving locally than I did when I was driving over the road. And why is that? And so I was explaining this. I was like, look, you have to be prepared to live like basically filthy, for weeks on end. It doesn't matter how much you clean that truck. There's all kinds of crap going on. You're dealing with these truck stops. You're dragging stuff into your truck and you're living in it. You could clean your truck every day, but you wouldn't get anything done. And so you have to be prepared to deal with a lot of stuff, and it's not the most comfortable situation, and it's not for everybody. You're by yourself. You're in this box for weeks. I mean, there was a time where I was gone for 3 months at a time, and you're living in this little box. And it's like not everybody has the mental capacity to do this. And I was like, what they've done is they've lowered the barrier to entry so that they can rotate people in, save themselves money on the driver's side, and not pay the drivers near as well. And so people like you and I that are experienced drivers that have been doing this for a long time are just like, well, screw you. I don't have to do this. I don't, if I'm going to be gone from the house, I expect to be compensated for being gone away from my family. And you're not willing to compensate me. And then when you do get up to making like, 60, 70 cents a mile, whatever, what they start doing is they start nickeling and diming you. So they'll give you the 100-mile load here, the 200-mile load there, and they're nickeling and diming you. And they're giving these kids that are coming in making 48 cents a mile, they're giving them, the 600-mile load, the 1,100-mile load. And you're like, all right, well, this is just bullshit because they're making just as much as me because they're getting the long haul and they don't have the experience to drive the mountains, to deal with the snow, to chain tires, to do all the things that are incorporated in driving truck. So eventually it pushes people like you and I out of, not necessarily out of the industry, but back into a local position because it's like, well, I can be with my family, I can make more money, and I don't have to deal with the whole headache of being uh over the road. Then screw you, I'll do it that way. And that was part of the reason I went regional. It was like every October, into October, beginning of November, every year I had a route and it would take me to Illinois, Chicago, Chicago to Cleveland, and then Cleveland to Buffalo. Like, and that drive is terrible. That's a terrible drive at that time of year. That's horrible. And you're going to pay me 60 cents a mile to do that? Screw you, pal. Put somebody out here that's never done it before. Put one of these kids out here that's going to try hitting those snowbanks at 50 miles an hour. See what happens. You're not going to abuse me like that. So I went regional. I just started driving Texas and Louisiana. I was like, I don't want to deal with that crap anymore. If I don't have to deal with it, I ain't going to deal with it. And I didn't lose any money going regional. I made the exact same amount of money driving, 6 days a week and freaking home for a day and a half every week. I was like, okay, I'm home more and I'm driving less and I make the same amount of money. How does this make any sense to anybody?
Right. Well, that's what I'm here to do, is to help make it make sense. And what's happening is, adjusted for inflation, on average, the American truck drivers' wages are roughly 50% of what they were in 1980. So 44 years on since the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, the forces of deregulation have also depopulated our bank accounts, which, is sort of a natural consequence of opening up the market to things. But what's happened is that, some of the people that like free markets in one area, they really don't like it in another. So in a market economy, wages and labor are commodities themselves, right? The truck drivers are a commodity. The labor that you need to get whatever done is a commodity, and they don't want those wages to go up. So the people who want the market open and free for anybody to get into it, to push prices down for consumers, do not want to see the prices go up from those same market forces. So they've come up with some novel methods of keeping the wages down so that when presented with, the tough conditions of being away from home, having to put up with snow, the vagaries of life on the road, that's hard, and it's hard to find people to do that. So when you have a limited supply of something, the price for it should go up. They have come up with these ways to make sure that that price doesn't actually go up. So part of it's the corporate welfare, bugging the government for money. Oh, please finance our training schools. We can't find anybody. There's a truck driver shortage. Not true. Okay, cool. We've gone through all of the unemployment offices and we've pulled all of the, what Marx called the lumpen proles. We've kicked them all out and told them to go to truck driving school, and even those people quit because they don't like it either. What do we do next? Well, let's bring in people from the third world. Let's look the other way as visas are abused. Let's look the other way as people don't even have visas. Let's look the other way as DMVs hand out CDLs like candy to people, even though they never completed a test and they don't speak English. It's actually part of the, CFR, the federal regulations. To have a CDL in the United States of America, you must have a functional understanding and use of the English language to have a CDL. Nobody's enforcing that,
Yeah.
right? So again, we don't want to actually have to pay market rate. Some operators do. Again, the average wage is down. There are niche markets again where you can still make a living driving a truck, but
Hmm.
they are the niche market and outlier at the other end of the of the range. And so you just see these complexes that have developed in order to make sure that Amazon and Procter and Gamble and Walmart and all these companies don't have to have a marginally increased transportation spend. God forbid that some major corporation has to pay more for something. Can't have that. So let's sweep the detritus of the third world into America, put them behind the wheel, and offload the costs of that to everybody else, which is higher insurance rates from nuclear verdicts, from people driving trucks that have no idea what they're doing. Um, I'm in the middle of writing a fairly substantial Substack about this in Canada because in Canada it has reached like critical problem every single day. There's some new truck accident, in Ontario, many of them. British Columbia, there's Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts now dedicated to nothing but documenting truck crashes in Canada, and it's real simple. The Canadian government has decided that um, we're just going to let people from India move to Canada and they can just all be truck drivers. Whether or not they speak English or they're qualified doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And there's this thing in Canada now, it's been going on for a few years. They're called LMIAs, Labor Market Impact Assessments. And an LMIA, this document, employers in Canada can apply for it and they can have an LMIA assessor come to their business, assess the local market conditions, assess what the wages are, assess where the people are, what skill levels are available, and then give a document to you that you then take to the government that says, my local labor market doesn't have enough people, so I can bring in temporary foreign workers or I can get work visas for people from other countries to come to Canada. What do you know? That entire program is rife with abuse. Most of the people offering these labor market impact assessments are often recent immigrants themselves, and then they're related to recruiters in India and other countries. And then those recruiters in other countries, what are they doing? Well, pay me $30,000 and then I'll get you one of these work visas so that you can move to Canada and then work a minimum wage job that might only pay you 40 or 50 grand a year if you're lucky,
Hmm.
right? And oftentimes, it's like basic entry level service jobs, right? Working at Tim Hortons, working at Wendy's, working at some other fast food place. Most of those franchises now are owned by Indians, and the Indians don't want to like pay locals, market rate. They want it absolutely cheapest possible. And if they can't get the people, they just complain to the government, and the government gives them visas, and then they bring in more of their friends from India to Canada to come and work, and then all of a sudden teenagers can't get jobs anymore,
Yeah.
right? And this is happening, and it's not just in fast food; it's all across the economy. It's rife in trucking, and it's just like, okay, what about the people that already live here?
Hmm.
What about the fact that like all you're doing is suppressing everybody's wages, right? And this situation is so bad, specifically in trucking, that Canada's biggest newspaper, the Globe and Mail, they're sort of a center right kind of newspaper, has been around forever. They did a huge deep dive on this in 2019, 5 years ago, and they found out that, surprise, surprise, there's these networks of people that are like all working together, especially in British Columbia, where it's like an Indian guy owns a truck driving school. His cousin owns a small trucking company. Their other cousin or some guy they know who's also Indian works for a immigration firm, and then his buddy gets these LMIAs, and then they're like, it's just like it's just an assembly line, right?
Hmm.
Oh, there's a truck driver shortage in Canada. Well, I can call my recruiter friend in the Punjab. We'll get some illiterate peasant from there. They fly to Vancouver. They go to his buddy's truck driving school for 3 weeks. That guy, that truck driving school knows a crooked corrupt DMV official at ICBC, gets them their class one, even though they don't speak English and haven't got a clue what they're doing. Cool, bang onto this trailer, drive across the Rocky Mountains, and we'll see you when you get to Toronto. And it's an assembly line, and it
Right.
just throws all these people on the road in Canada. And then oftentimes they end up hauling loads into the US and getting in accidents and stuff down here.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is being done about this. The Globe and Mail published this thing 5 years ago. Has anything happened? Nope, zero. And it's still going on, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's gotten so bad now that even the CBC covered it. There's this 20-minute, TV production, for this show on CBC called Marketplace, and it got released in October, and people keep sharing it everywhere, and it's like an investigation into like dodgy truck driving schools in Toronto and who's doing anything about putting these guys on the road. Like when the CBC has finally reported on it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when they're playing catch up to things some of us have known for years, there's a problem.
Yeah. And I noticed that I guess it was 2 years ago, I was talking to a kid that I was working with at the store here in Orange, and he wanted to be a truck driver. And I was like, "Are you sure you want to be a truck driver? You have a 2-year-old daughter. You're newly married for the most part. You'd only been married for like 18 months or whatever it was." I was like, "I don't know if that's the industry you want to go into." And he goes, "Well, how did you get your CDL?" And I was like, "Well, I found a company that was hiring truck drivers and training them, and they put me through like a month-long training course that was specific to their industry and to what I would be doing for them. And after that month, I went and took a CDL test and had to pass, my driving test and my written test, and then I got trained in the trucks that the company actually drove for another week. And then I got to go on a crew where I was following around people that had been driving trucks, and I was driving a truck following them around. And I was like, it was a process. It took me about 2 or 3 months to get to the point where I was actually able to drive on my own and be kind of like an independent driver. And he was like, "Oh, well, no, it's a lot easier than that nowadays. I just go pay these guys like $2,000 or $3,000, take their go to their school for a week, take their test, and then I can go drive over the road and I'm gone." And I'm like, "Well, that's why there's so many accidents on the road, because nobody's getting trained properly. Like you said, it's an assembly line of drivers." And I remember when I was with Crete, one of the things that just like blew my mind, every Friday they would bring in the new class of drivers, the new drivers into the company. And every Friday, if I was in Wilmer or one of the other hubs, I would see 15, 20 new drivers. And this was at multiple hubs. This wasn't just at one place. This was at multiple hubs around the country, probably 20, 30 hubs. So you're talking about 200 to 300 new guys every week. And they were cycling through these drivers because they didn't know what they were getting into. They couldn't handle, the stresses and all the different things that we deal with out over the road. They had no idea. And they weren't getting put in trucks with a trainer and riding around for a month or whatever and learning, the rules of the road and the way that things goes. They were just getting thrown in trucks and sent out. And I was like, okay, well, that's why you're losing guys that, have experience, because you want to pay, again, you want to go down to pay these guys 48 cents a mile and just rotate through them because it's cheaper for you to do that. And then they try to see, everybody talks about the deregulation, and what they did, they deregulated the side that dealt with the drivers, but they overregulated the side that dealt with the vehicles. So now they're trying to create these vehicles that compensate for what these drivers don't know how to do, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. No, it's the imposition of technology in the face of a mass de-skilling operation, right?
mhm,
So there's this association of like motor vehicle, like basically it's like the association of DMVs, right? So you got your state DMV in every state, and then they have an association where they all talk to each other about DMV stuff. those guys, via their statistics, show that 450,000 new CDLs are issued every year in the United States. 450,000 every year.
Jesus.
There are only roughly 3 million truck driving jobs in the US, 3 to 3.5 million. It's like, and some of those aren't even truck driving. It's just a job that requires a CDL, right?
Hmm.
So you're producing over 10% of the total required amount of drivers every single year. There was a study done. There's a guy I quote often. His name is Steve Shelley. He wrote this book in 2016, which was an investigation of the lease operator model as a way of like offloading costs even more onto drivers.
Hmm.
And he did another study for the state of California. Him and another academic were brought in by the California State Department of Agriculture because they kept hearing from farmers and corporate ag companies that they couldn't get drivers, right? So he goes and does the investigation, and they do this whole ass study. And in it, they even quote Pete Buttigieg, Secretary Pete, soon to be unemployed. Um, and Buttigieg even admitted, like, yeah, we're seeing numbers that we know of that 300,000 people every year quit. We lose 300,000 truckers that just quit. It's probably more. That's just what the feds know about.
Right.
So 450,000 in, 300 or more that they admit quit every single year, and most of that's financed by the taxpayer. And then what happens? There was a really famous verdict. There was they wrapped up this court case here a few weeks ago. Werner was involved in where he was this new guy was driving across. I can't remember what interstate it was in Texas, and like this sort of storm came through. And it was really icy roads, and a van spun out, went through the median, and hit this Werner truck. Now there's some questions about why the van driver wasn't held to the same standards as the Werner driver, but like this guy had failed his assessments. It was clear that he should not have been a truck driver, and yet Werner turned him loose on the road anyway. And so now that's some hundreds of millions of dollars of settlement. I had an insurance guy on my podcast once. It's the only podcast I've had to take down, as a matter of fact.
Really?
This guy's name is Darren Yancey, and he's a trucking insurance pro. He's been in the business for over 3 decades on all angles, selling insurance, being an underwriter, working within the insurance companies. Him and a buddy had 10 trucks in the Texas oil field, seen it all, knows the industry inside and out. And there was some robot, some insurance company that he mentioned on my show, not criticizing them, not blaming them for anything, but merely by mentioning their name in passing, he got sent a letter from that insurance company saying, y'all better have that podcaster guy take it down or you're going to get sued. You have no right to even mention us. So
Jeez.
he made me pull it down. Yeah, I mean, he didn't make me. He asked me to, but I didn't want him to get sued. So because the insurers are, Darren said to me, because I asked him, what if you're a guy like me who's got 25 years of experience, over 25 years of experience. I've driven truck in 4 countries. I've never been involved in a collision. Never hurt anybody. I haven't had a moving. I mean, I got a seatbelt ticket here last year, but whatever. I haven't had no moving violations, no speeding. Never gotten in an accident. For lack of a better term, perfect driving record. I should be getting a pretty significant discount. Like if I come to you, I start my own company, I should be, I should be less of a risk to you, and I should get a discount. And he said, well, that's not how it works. He said, the problem is all the major insurers are putting out so much money for the dipshits that are on the road and getting accidents. And whether it's a car or truck driver's fault, doesn't matter. There's just people out there getting in accidents. And, you have the ambulance chasers that, try and extract as much as they can out of the truckers' insurance, that because there's so many huge payouts going out, they cannot offer the discounts that they should be able to the guys that are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So insurance is already sort of a socialized system, right? Where basically everybody puts money into the pool to cover for when things happen. That's the sort of model of insurance.
Right.
But you should be able to reward the people that are good actors in the market by being good drivers and not getting in accidents. If your risk profile is lower, your contribution to the pool should be less. And the people who get in accidents all the time, their contribution should be higher. It sort of works like that, but not really. Because the number of people in the pool who are dummies and get in accidents and the outlays because of the court cases is so high, just the market doesn't function properly in the way that it should be.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's get to what Biden did here this week. And you just released, you just had a Substack, Newsweek article, I'm sorry, come out 2 days ago on December 19th. Um, about the visa program that Biden's running, and this runs kind of parallel with what you were saying about what was going on in Canada. So, what's Biden doing with this visa program here in the U.S.?
So there's a couple of different visa programs that American companies can use to get highly skilled, or if there's a shortage of workers,
Yeah.
which there should never be in a functioning market economy, because in theory, if there's a shortage of something, the price gets bid up, and then people come in to do it. So yeah, this guy, the head of the DHS, Alejandro Mayorkas, makes an announcement here last week, or maybe it was a week before, about doubling the number of these visas. They're H-1Bs or H-2Bs.
I think it's the H2. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were going from like 66,000. They're going to add another 64. Hello, Georgia. How's it going? Yes. Okay, I'll make her a coffee in a minute. Thank you. Yeah,
You
they're
want me
up and
to,
at it now.
you want me to pause it and let you go do
No,
something?
no, no. I'll finish. I'll finish answering this question, and then you can hit pause.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, Mayorkas announces that they're doubling the number of these visas, and then there's a little sidebar to that, is that because I found the announcement in Landline, which is the official sort of online magazine of WIDA, the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, it showed that they were giving out like 1,500 visas for truck drivers. And I thought to myself, well, how is it that they're getting away with this? I mean, it doesn't sound like much. And even the Landline article says, it's really not that much. It's like a minor amount. But like 2024 has been a really bad year for trucking. And I referenced, there's this other website called FreightWaves, and they have like a really good team over there, and they document all this stuff.
Hmm.
And, in the last 2 months alone, it's verifiable that in October and November, that we know of, like 4,000 truck drivers got laid off. And that's just October and November. That's not the rest of the year. That's not all these other companies that are like teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, that are, barely holding on. And that's not to count, owner operators that we don't know the numbers for. So why is the government like giving out these visas to people when we have like a pretty significant downturn here and tons of truck drivers getting laid off? Hi, Vivi.
Hello.
Vivian, say hi to Tommy.
Hi.
Yeah,
So
this is why we
cute.
try and start. This is why we try and start early around here before they get up.
Yeah, I feel you, man. It's all good. It's the
Yeah.
same
So
thing. When Jason comes on, it's the same thing with his daughter. The boss starts coming in telling him what to do.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I just sort of said in the article, I'm like, why do this on your way out the door? This is not necessary. Even the other industries, who knows, man? Like, there's an argument to be made that, like, oh, you got to have these H-1B and H-2B visas for really highly skilled immigrants and people we can, like, maybe you should be training people here for those highly skilled jobs. Like, why do we have to depend on, India or China or wherever for like certain types of skill? Like, shouldn't you be like doing something to promote people in the United States to know these things, so you don't have to
Hmm.
depend? Like, we've just globalized everything, right? Like, offshore the manufacturing, inshore the labor. Like, it just the whole thing is messy, and it's sort of a slap in the face to taxpayers. Like, um, if you're an American and you were born here, like, the government should be doing things to like help you, not like make your life worse. In theory, and of course, many years of them doing the opposite forever. But I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. So I made a pitch to Newsweek. They were all about it. So and I guess as part of the like sort of Doge thing too, all of this costs money. We have these bureaucracies that go deal with all this stuff, and clearly, if you have bureaucrats that can't go on freightwaves.com and read a few articles in a couple of minutes and be like, "Oh damn, wow, all these thousands of truck drivers got laid off here this year. Maybe we don't need to issue these visas." Like if they can't do that and we're paying their salaries, maybe we don't need to pay them.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I'll pause it for you, man.
I've
All right. So one of the things I've noticed here over the last couple of years is I'm seeing a lot more trucking companies that are uh, foreign owned. And the way I notice is the name of the company is in a foreign language. So,
Yeah, you see that a lot on trucks. One of the so there's a lady named Clarissa Hawes who writes for FreightWaves. She used to be a writer for, I think she worked for OIDA, maybe Landline. She's been around the business a long time, and she's written a couple articles about what I loosely refer to as the Chicago Volvo Mafia. So there's a number of trucking companies based in the Chicagoland area, and specifically Elk Grove Village, and owned by a lot of Russians, Ukrainians, Serbians, and those guys, some of them might be, above board operators. Some of them are not, and you'll see trailers going down the road with like the "Come Drive for Us" ads, but it's in Cyrillic, which is a sort of
hmm
Russian language,
hmm
and those guys are kind of famous for bringing guys here from home, putting them in the truck. There's a whole meme about this on FreightX called Strong Solo Sergi, where like the brokers that like sell these loads will get a call from one of these, gangsters in Chicago and say, "Oh yeah, 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 I've got a truck with two drivers because it's like a rush load." But it turns out it's only one guy, and they use the backdoor entry to their ELD to rewrite their logbook stuff for them. And the meme is Strong Solo Sergi. It's like one truck driver named Sergi, and he does it all. All right.
Right.
Hi, Georgia, are you back? Can you say hi to Tommy?
Hello. I know you can't hear me.
Yeah,
Oh,
and then there's
they're getting so big, man.
yeah, yes they are. Georgia, when are you going to be 5?
I don't know.
You do know. When's your birthday? March. It's in March. You'll be 5 in March. 3 more months. Yeah, so there's the Chicago Volvo Mafia, and then there seems to be particular immigrant groups that have like really penetrated the business. The Somalians up in Minnesota have got into it big time, and then Canada has its recent arrivals from India, and they're big in California too. There's tons of trucking companies in California now that are Indian fellas,
hmm
and then there's various smatterings of other ethnicities and whatnot. But again, there's legal ways of doing things, and then there's illegal ways of doing things. And unfortunately, some of these guys are big on the illegal part because trucking's a very, it's marginally profitable. Like if you're a trucking company and you make 5% over your expenses in a year, you're doing great.
Right.
And so, if you're not necessarily, like you just showed up here and your interests are your own wallet and not like worrying about compliance or the safety of anybody around you, maybe maybe this is how things turn out. There was an incident. I got a good buddy named Chris that lives in Eastern Kentucky, and he had shared this story about a tow truck driver in Kentucky who was killed. He was on the side of the road trying to assist the motorist, like their car had broke down, and this guy got run over by a dude from Uzbekistan working for one of these crooked outfits out of Chicago. And when the cops pulled him over, he was, he had like an iPad or something. He was like watching YouTube videos while he was driving down the road. Killed this guy, disappears. He went back to Uzbekistan. He's gone,
Hmm.
right? And so that's starting to be something we're seeing in the media now. They'll do stories about this. They'll be like, "Oh, we're looking for this driver," and then he just disappears. They have no idea where he went. They fled the country. Happens in Canada a lot. These Indian guys. There's a lady and her daughter were killed a few weeks ago out in Winnipeg, and dude disappeared. Or I think the cops let him go. They arrested him, charged him all this stuff, let him go on bail, and then just gonzo. Um, and it's like, okay, cool. So we can have people that show up here, come here to be truck drivers, get themselves in a mess, and then when the law comes looking for them, it's like, okay, cool. I'll just go back home now, right? Um, there's another. There's this other Substack who he stopped writing here a few months ago. His name was David. I can't remember his last name, and he's this lawyer from Canada, and he decided to quit doing law and become a truck driver. And so he was documenting his like career change on Substack, and I was like one of his very small number of readers. So I'm watching his stuff, and he was also a little bit of a shit lib. Some of his politics were like, pretty blue pilled, as it were.
Uh-huh.
But whatever, nice enough guy. It was interesting to read. Hey, what's this guy's like, training like? Who's he working for? And over the course of a few of his Substacks, he was doing a lot of teamwork. After he'd already been on the road for a few months, they're like, "Hey, you want to run team and like help train these other guys?" And the company he was working for was putting him with Indian drivers, and this guy didn't seem to mind. And one of the things that he observed is that the Indians will come work here, but then they go back to the Punjab to get married, right? Like they're single guys,
Hmm.
and then they're cycling in and out, right? Like they'll work in Canada for a few months, and then they go back to India. So there's
Hmm.
this whole commuter thing where there's trucking companies in Canada who have just gotten so used to this, like, well, we're not going to pay locals market rates to drive truck anymore. So we'll use the Indians. And even if the Indians don't stick around and they only work for 3 months, then they want to go back and hang out in the Punjab for 3 months and then come back later. So they got all these like part-time Indian guys commuting literally from India and then driving truck in Canada just back and forth.
Really? Well, I
Yeah.
know, I know my so Beatrix's cousin from South Africa, he drives for a company in Canada. But I mean, he's been driving for that company now for at least 10 years, maybe
Yeah,
more.
but he stayed though. He lives here.
Yeah. Yeah, he lives he lives in Canada. I mean, that's and he had thought about taking the money that he had saved and moving back to South Africa because, obviously at some point you're going to miss where you're from. And but he looked at as possibly starting a business because in South Africa, you can't make any, like South Africa, Namibia, them African countries, you don't make any money driving truck. And then there's such a high risk of hijackings and, crime on the roads that it's not worth going and trying to make a living there. And so he was looking at possibly taking the money that he had saved up, moving back to South Africa and starting like a touring company, that take people on guided tours, et cetera. And he was just like, man, he goes, I thought about it. And he goes, I was looking into it, but I just can't do it. I can't make the money that I can make, driving truck in Canada.
Well, no, and I
And
mean, and South Africa is its own special basket case when you've got guys like Julius Malema running around saying, kill the Boer, and we're just going to take all
right.
whitey stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But I was just thinking about it like, I understand I understand going and looking for opportunity, but to take it, it's those people that are willing to take advantage of the opportunity, and they take advantage of it. You see this a lot with illegals that'll come and they'll work like a construction job under the table. They'll take that money and they'll send it back to Mexico, taking it completely out of our economy. And and boosting the economy of the country they're from. And it sounds like that's what people in India are doing to Canada. They're taking the money out of Canada, moving the money into their country, and boosting the economy of India at the expense of Canada.
Right. Yeah. No. And I remember reading somewhere um, a really interesting phrase I found. I can't remember who I first saw propagated. It's America as ATM. Right. So like people just show up here, stick their card in, take some money, and leave.
Hmm.
And another thing that happens in the trucking business that's like this is not even the actual driving truck side. This is the load brokerage side. So a major a major problem, and I think I talked about that briefly in the Doge piece too, is these sort of like fraudulent freight brokers.
Hmm.
Or just dodgy stuff that happens in the sort of middleman part of this, right? So let's say you're a company, you want to ship something, you call a freight broker to find you the trucks. The freight broker don't actually have any trucks. They just like make the phone calls and do all the
Right.
organizing. And a lot of those guys are offshore now, right? Especially in Eastern Europe. So like they might have like a satellite office here in the US or a postal office where they're registered. And so the freight brokers are taking whatever their percentage is, 10, 20, 30% off the top. And quite often, not always, but often enough that it's gone. It's left the United. That money has left the United States. It's not getting circulated back into our economy at all. You
Right.
know, there's a guy who oh geez, his nickname is PBJ, Paul Bernard Jarovlovsky. He runs this freight newsletter called Freight Caviar, and he's this Polish American guy, and he's dialed into all these Eastern European operators, and he talks about the freight industry a lot. Some of those people are legitimate, but like he flies to Eastern Europe here at some point in the past year. I remember he posted this video on Twitter, and there's a really dodgy company who's been under investigation by the FBI. They're called Super Ego Holdings, and you'll see their trailers. There's this like big old logo on the side, which is a crazy name. But they were advertising in Serbia. Like he gets off the plane and he's like driving through Serbia, and they've got these huge billboards and signs everywhere. Come work for us, right?
Hmm.
So these kind of dodgy, shady Eastern European gangster operated companies are literally advertising for drivers in Serbia. Hey, come work for us. Like, okay, so where are you getting the visas? Are you getting the visas? How are these guys being trained? Do they speak English? The speaking English thing, people think, oh, that's racist. Oh, you don't need to know English to drive. Okay, maybe. Maybe you don't need to know English to operate a vehicle, but the country you're operating in, all the signs are in English.
Yeah.
All of the enforcement officers you have to deal with, the cops, the DOT, they're going to speak to you in English.
Yeah.
All of those road signs that tell you, "Hey, there's a storm coming, motherfuckers. You should either pull over or get off the road, or you have to put your chains on to go over this mountain pass." All of that is in English. All of your apps, your weather warnings are all in English. So you're making yourself a hazard and a threat to other people on the road by not communicating in the lingua franca of the place you are in, right? Why? What? Like, this is like basic common sense. But like, if you say that now, well, you're racist, bro.
Well, yeah, and this is something I noticed, and this thing it it kind of took me by surprise whenever I was in Namibia. So what I did is I went into Namibia and I rented a four-wheel drive with camping equipment, and we went driving around the country. And it took me a day to figure out what I was looking at as far as the road signs go, because their road signs aren't written out; they're just symbols, right? So it would be the symbol of something. Here in the US, our road signs are written. Like it's a lot of it's written out. And so I was just looking at the symbols. I was asking my father-in-law, I was like, okay, what does that one mean? And I'm trying to figure out what all these road signs are because they're completely different. Like the speed limit signs, I didn't even know they were speed limit signs for the first 2 days. I didn't know what these signs were with the red circle. And I was like, what is this? It's just this white sign with a red circle and a number. And I'm asking him, I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, that's the speed limit. I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know because ours looks so different.
Yeah, they do that in
And
New
so,
Zealand too. Yeah.
and so it's like you have to here in order to understand the rules of the road, the hazards coming up, what's going on, you have to be able to read English. You have to be able to understand the language because it's not just in symbols and there's not like this universal like driving language, across the world. Like all these different places do things differently. And so I would see signs and I'd be like, does that mean such and such? And he'd be like, no, that means don't stop within the next like 500 meters or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, because I was trying to figure out, I want to figure out what's going on the road. Being a professional driver, being a guy that spent a lot of time on the road, I know I need to know what's going on as far as these signs go so I can keep up with what the traffic's doing. You know, a lot of it is recognizing patterns, sure. And if you drive enough, no matter where you're from, you can recognize the patterns. But there are times where you need to know what these signs say because it could be a very critical, situation coming up in front of you where you have, road workers on the side of the road. They're not necessarily paying attention to the traffic coming by. They're scooping dirt and stretching it out across the road. So you need to know to slow down to keep your eyes open for the backhoe that's operating or whatever. And if you can't read the language and you don't know what's going on, then you're in a bad situation.
So tell me a little bit more about your trip to Namibia. I know very little about that country. I mean, I know where it is on the map. It's sort of like, northwest of South Africa. I think it was at one time colonized by the Germans. I know it's mostly full of
Yeah.
desert. And I know that the fourth Mad Max movie had some scenes filmed there.
Oh,
That's about
really?
it.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
the most recent one that came out in like 2014 or 15, the Furiosa Fury Road.
Yeah.
I think some of that was filmed in Namibia.
Well, so there is a desert. It's the Namib Desert, stretches from the south west Namibia up the coast, and that would be your desert. It's the only place in the world where the desert meets the ocean, which was like one of the draws for me. My father-in-law is originally from there, so you've driven a lot, so you've seen a lot of what I'm going to talk about. Um, a lot of it looked like New Mexico. It was very kind of New Mexico like as far as like the mountains and the dry terrain, the mountains, the lack of vegetation. It was very open, like driving in Wyoming. I always compare it to because the country is about twice the size of Texas, but it has about 2.5 million people live there. So it's
Oh
very
wow.
sparse. It's very open. It was so nice. It was like there's not people everywhere. That was like great. Once you get out of Windhoek, which is the capital of Namibia, there's you don't really deal with traffic. Like there's really no traffic, and the roads are extremely nice. They're being taken care of by the Italians, and the Chinese are competing in Namibia to pave the roads, build dams, and deal with the infrastructure there in Namibia. It's going to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is why China's involved. Italy's been involved there for many years, but yeah, it was colonized by the Germans. You'll still like my father-in-law is from a little town called Ochu, closer to the northern part of Namibia, and we went there on the way to Etosha, where the Etosha Pan is, which is the national park where you will see all the animals like wandering around freely and in their natural habitat. But Ochu, it's this little bitty town, um, probably about I don't know 100 miles outside of Etosha, and a lot of the like store names, like the bakery, is still called the bakery, or bakere, which would was it's still written in German. I mean, there's just this large German influence there from where Germany colonized it. The people there love Germany. They love Germans. They're, you know, obviously mostly black persuasion, but there were there are a lot of farmers and ranchers that are still of German heritage and Dutch heritage that live down there.
Interesting. And so you mentioned the Belt and Road and the Chinese being there. What resources are they hoping to extract? What's in them there hills?
Salt, big salt industry, huge salt industry. When you get out on the coast, like we went out to the coast, we stayed at Henty's Bay, drove up to Cape Cross where the seal reservation is, and there was probably in that, I mean, what, 70 kilometers, uh, maybe a little bit more than 70 kilometers, about a 45-minute drive, an hour drive. And it was, I say about 5 to 6 salt mines just in that little like patch of road. There's salt everywhere. They have guys on the side of the road selling giant salt rocks, just chilling on the side of the road with a little booth selling you big large salt rocks that have just been mined. Yeah, salt's huge there. There's a lot of salt there.
Interesting. Interesting. No, I would have thought there would have been something more substantial mineral wise, but huh.
Maybe towards the center of the country, but really the only industry we really saw that was really prominent was salt. It's still a very poor nation. Um, you know, the Namibian dollar is the exact equivalent of the South African rand as far as value goes. So it's 1/18th of a dollar. So once you pay for the travel and all that, and you get there, it's everything's so cheap. It's just cheap to go around, and they don't make great wages because the population is so low. You don't see like the beggars on the side of the road and stuff like that, like you do in South Africa. But but they have like security guards at their grocery stores that walk around and watch the cars for thieves and stuff like that, because the unemployment rate is so high, the economy is so bad, there is the potential for theft and just petty crime like that. Typically, in Namibia, it's not as dangerous as South Africa, and I think that has a lot to do with population. People aren't
Yeah.
quite as desperate when you have less people, so you can spread
Did
that
you
money.
did you did you go inland at all? Like, am I to understand it that most of Namibia's population is on the coast?
No, no. Most of it's inland, actually, in the Windhoek area. They do have a large port city that I didn't make it to, um, called Swakopmund. Um, and then just south of there, there's another port city. It's the only port city in Namibia, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's south of Swakopmund, and it's the only place in Namibia where you can actually dock a ship. So they would have a large population there. Oh, Walvis Bay, that's what it's called, Walvis Bay. And so they call it the Skeleton Coast because it's so rocky right there up on the coastline that there's a lot of shipwrecks all up and down the coast. And so there's only the only area you can really get a ship in is the Walvis Bay area. So you do have population there in the Walvis Bay area, and then Windhoek, which is across the country, um, that borders with Botswana. Windhoek is near Botswana, so which is inland. So you'll have a lot of truck traffic moving from Walvis Bay to Windhoek, hauling materials because the imports come in there. All their food is imported, or like the vast majority of their food is imported, but it's coming in through South Africa up into Windhoek and then spread out from Windhoek out. I think Windhoek is probably, I don't know, it's the size of a medium-sized city here in the U.S. and the population is like 250,000. So it's fairly busy. I mean, it's like go 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 all the time. But
Right.
when the sun gets goes down, it gets quiet, which is unlike any American city I've ever been in. So it was still nice and relaxing the night we did stay in Vintook. It wasn't like overwhelming or anything like that. It was nice.
Cool. So how is Beatrix anyway? Is she still tucked in bed?
I heard her up a while ago. I think she was looking to see if I had made her coffee yet, but I hadn't. I made me coffee and I came straight in here. So I got to go check on her when we're done here. So
Well, tell her I said g'day.
I will. Well, you have anything you want to follow up on any of this? Anything we didn't touch on? You want to
Oh
talk about the
man.
4,000 layoffs for a second? Because that seemed like a pretty significant number, seeing that they're talking about what 1,500 H2B visas to these foreigners coming in to drive truck, but we have 4,000 layoffs. What are these layoffs due to? Do they have record of whether
Oh,
these layoffs?
it's just it's a contraction. Like, so the freight market had a really big spike during COVID. You know,
Right, right.
everyone's hiding at home, but all of a sudden everyone's got their gibs from the government. Their your COVID money, stay at home, and everyone's ordering everything off Amazon. So there's this weird thing where not very many people are working, but all of a sudden they have all this like fresh printed government money to spend on other stuff. So there was like a big spike in demand for trucking, and a bunch of people got into it. Rates were ridiculous. Tons of people were like making money instantaneously, and that's been trailing off. And 2024 has not been good. And so a lot of companies are just like struggling to find loads. Rates are in the toilet. You go on some load boards now, and like there's places offering like $1.60 a mile of freight, and it's like it costs over $2 a mile to operate a truck.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much below cost freight on the market right now. Like it's just impossible for people to make money, which is why some of these folks from other countries, running team, two or three guys in a truck, or they're happy to work for less wages because they don't really live here. They come, strong solo Sergi comes over from Serbia or the Ukraine or whatever, works for a Russian gangster. The Russian gangster pays them a third of what an American driver would get, but they're happy to take it because over there their money goes further and they don't really give a shit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you've just got all these companies running around operating at less than cost, and that again it puts downward pressure on rates, and you can only do that for so long, and then companies just start going out of business.
Yeah.
It's just bad. It's just bad business. And again, like I say, this is encouraged by the government, and or they're not doing anything to stop the factors which are affecting it. I'm going to be writing. I write for a sort of think tank, sort of website called the American Compass, which is sort of a labor, like a sort of quote unquote conservative labor think tank.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really trying to like, they're the types that have realized that, shipping everybody's jobs offshores and gutting American manufacturing and doing all these things was a bad idea. And they're like big on reshoring, paying people correctly, as a way to sort of rejuvenate America. And I've written two essays for them this year. My third one's probably going to come out in January, and it's going to be a set of policy proposals to give to the incoming, returning, I should say, Trump administration. And one of them is going to be like knock it off with these visas and enforce existing laws, enforce the English requirement for a CDL, look into mandating even more training because like one of the reasons these dodgy CDL schools are able to like just shuffle people out the door is the requirements are too low, right? And if this is a safety specific area that the federal government is supposed to be, protecting us on, then they need to get to work. And all these dumb CDL mills will be out of business or have to significantly restructure what they're doing if the government brought in something like graduated licensing, right? Like in New Zealand and Australia, they have multiple levels of truck license. In order to pull a semi, like an 18 wheeler in New Zealand and Australia, you must have had 1 year of experience with a straight truck, right? Like a CDLB.
Hmm.
Can't get around it. You get your car license, you go and you do your CDLB, and you cannot go and apply for your trailer license until that CDLB has got 1 year on it.
Right.
They're just not letting you do it. They
Good.
want you. They want you to go and get a practice driving a smaller, less dangerous vehicle first. I think that's a reform that they should bring to America. It would instantly put a stop to the CDL mills, and it would instantly get rid of all these fly-by-night operations, be they homegrown or exploiting labor from other countries. Sorry, guys. 1 year experience driving a smaller truck first. Boom. That almost completely eliminates what we're seeing on the road right now.
I also think you should have class A experience driving local before you go over the road,
Yes,
because
100%.
it's a lot different to drive 650 miles a day than it is to drive 300 miles a day, but you can't just go from not driving at all to driving 650 miles a day. Like you just can't. That is not a feasible, formula.
Right. And you also get to know more, right? Like if you spend a year or 6 months or whatever working local, and you get to like know all the little tricks of the
Right.
trade and like, more
And
practice
you're in a
hooking up and
familiar
dropping the
area.
trailers. Yeah, well, one of the reasons they have the high washout rates, which is like kind of undiscussed. I mean, Vishelli touches on it a little bit on his book, and there's been a couple other people who've like, acknowledged this, but it's still not widely understood is that the way that we train drivers in America, the CDL system, where you go to some truck driving school and then they throw you off the deep end to run OTR, is that you have no idea what you're doing yet. All you did was pass the state test, which, as we've just described, is like it's basement level understanding of trucking,
Right.
and
Yep.
now you're on the road. Now you're far away from home. Now they might send you out for 2 or 3 weeks at a stretch before you go home. What about your family? What about like the new lifestyle of being away from everybody and your friends and your community? That's a stressor that weighs on your mind while you're
And
out on the
are
road.
you able to sleep in the back of a truck? Like some people can't
Right.
sleep.
Some people can't sleep. Like there's all these considerations that the CDL mill system and this idea of taking new guys and throwing them out over the road does not take into consideration. And that will affect your ability as a driver. That can make you a worse driver if you're not suited for that. And
Right.
so if you're learning the time you're learning to become a trucker, and again, I don't want people to think I don't want well, let's just close the industry off and have it be all old guys. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm safer drivers, you'll weed out the people that can't do it sooner, so you'll have less of this retention churn problem, and it will be better for the people doing the job, right? Like,
Well, and it's better for these people that want to say, "Oh, you want to close the market down to new drivers coming in." It would be better for you because it's you and your families are out there on the road with these trucks. You should be
yeah,
demanding that there's a higher training qualification to get out on the road. So some dude doesn't come down with 80,000 pounds and run through your family of five.
yeah,
This is
no, no, no,
it,
for sure.
it's absurd to think that these people are like, well, it's just driving a truck. Okay, well, you get out there and you go do it. You go do it. You just spend 2 weeks out there. And it's one of the things I always said and I mean, this is kind of different, but it's kind of the same thing too. One of the things I would always tell our guys at the store, my managers, I was like, look, these guys that load trucks, send them out there with me so they can see, because they're not out there unloading these trucks. They don't know
Yeah.
what I'm dealing with out there. It will help them see the truck differently. And it's the same thing when it comes to driving. Get out there and go down an 8% grade at 2 o'clock in the morning, in a place you're completely unfamiliar with. You know, do that. See how this operates so that you have some kind of idea. Rotate your schedule, right? Drive for drive for 12 hours, then take your 10 hours off and then drive for another 12 hours and see how that schedule continues to walk. And you start your week driving at 6 o'clock in the morning and you end your week getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to get on the road. Like you got to see how these things operate. There are different there This is a completely different way of life. It's a complete different type of operation. And I like none of us, not one, even the new drivers, they don't want to go out there and kill somebody, but they're being put in a position to fail. And it's not fair to
Yeah,
them because they
no,
have the potential of being good drivers. I mean, it's not like when I started driving and I was driving a day cab for days on end and stretching a piece of plywood between the seats to sleep, right? Between my shifts. But at the same time, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, to be out there. And so learn the environment, ride around with somebody that's experienced for a while, understand the environment and what you're getting into. That's all we're demanding because it
yeah,
makes all
no,
of us look bad.
right, yeah, no, and what you just said about the scheduling, like disciplining your body to deal with all of these crazy schedule changes and starting at 1 a.m., starting at 10 in the evening, starting at 6, like your
Right.
the vagaries of the road and scheduling between all these different customers and places you have to go, like you're literally turning yourself kind of into a robot that like just on off on off on off. And a lot of people can't handle that. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to train their bodies to it. And nobody tells you this when you sign up, all right?
Well, and
Like,
as you get older, your body starts rejecting it. Like I had that happen to me when I was over the road. I got to the point where I just finally had to get in touch with my dispatcher and tell him. I said, "Look, I find that I'm getting tired at night when I'm driving. And I never had this issue when I was younger, but I'm having the issue now. And I find that I'm having trouble staying awake at night when I'm driving, and I'm having trouble sleeping during the day. And I don't, it's your body changes, and
yeah,
you have to learn to adapt and understand and know how your body feels and know how you can work it, and you can't go from being an attorney for 30 years that loses his practice and law license and comes and starts driving a truck at 50 years old and do what a 23-year-old guy who's starting driving truck can do, like as far as like your body and
yeah, the
and the
physical
times that
stuff.
you
Yeah.
drive. Yeah. And so you have to be aware of these things. So you can't just push these guys through these schools and expect it to be all hunky dory, because people are going to die out there on the road. And that's not a joke. That's terrible.
No,
You
and
don't
they,
want that to happen.
and they are dying. And this
Yeah.
another I mentioned earlier in the show, I'm working on a Substack that's addressing this problem in Canada. And in my research, like I'm just gonna like throw in link after link after link after link of people dying, and I'm just gonna be like, look, here's what's going on, folks. It's all, start counting the dead bodies. A friend of mine,
And it's not only the
Trent.
new drivers, because like I had situations where I would be parked at a truck stop sleeping, and one of these new drivers goes and tries to park next to me and they hit my truck and wakes me up. Now I'm up half the night trying to fix a damn mirror or whatever they bumped into because they don't know how to back into a parking spot.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's another thing, man. Just stay away from the truck stops. Oh my God. But oh yeah, what they've done to our brotherhood is it's just terrible. But yeah, so yeah, and the there's just a lot of this is totally unnecessary, and all of it's downstream of bad government policy, which is built to suit the greed heads. And I'm not having it, and I'm going to keep writing about it. And so, yeah, Tommy, question:
Yes, sir.
would you be
Oh,
um,
the audio is cutting out for some reason.
oh, all right.
There we go. There we go. I hear you.
Yeah, got a weird wire connection. Mid America Truck Show, Louisville, Kentucky, late March. That be something you want to come check out?
Maybe. I don't know. I've already taken some vacation for February. because my dad wants to go see Dream Theater, and I told him I'd go with him. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so I took a couple of days off so I could go see Dream Theater with my dad. So I don't know if I'll have the vacation time to be able to take, but keep me updated on that.
All
And I want
right.
to add,
Yeah.
I want you to add two things to your article. Get rid of driver assist and bring back the manual transmission.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a going to be there's yeah, there will be components of the next couple things I'm writing that definitely touch on the technological aspect of it because it's starting this feedback loop. Something interesting. I posted us on Twitter. It was like an internal document from Kenworth, the truck manufacturer, and they were talking about their orders and stuff. And this was distributed to all the Kenworth dealers in Canada. And it said that like we are only going to be building 10% of trucks we sell in Canada now with manual transmissions.
Yep.
They're capping it
Well,
because
and and this is not to say anything bad about the people I work with, but the drivers I work with are all fairly recent drivers, like the last like 6, 7 years have gotten their CDLs, and not one of them knows how to drive a manual. Not one of them. And
right.
now it's an endorsement on your license that you have to that it'll say whether or not that you're qualified for a manual transmission or not. And I'm like, that is insanity.
Yeah, there's a strong correlation between knowing how to drive manual and being a better driver. Period. So, yeah, the Canadian government is because of their worshiping of the sky have made it so that like well the truck manufacturer is saying well the only way we can guarantee these fuel mileage numbers or emissions numbers is because like we can't trust the trucking schools to teach people how to drive properly anymore, so we're just going to make automatic transmissions, which is totally stupid. It's anti-human, it's anti-skill, and now it's basically law. And like oh, this is a free market and a free society. Yeah, well, good luck to you like trying to find a piece of equipment you want to use to your specifications anymore because the government is just saying no. So much for your freedom there, eh?
Right.
And a tie-in I want to make, an argument I want to make is that it's it's convenient that they're trying to say you can't have manual transmissions anymore at the same time as they just want to cycle through all these new people into the industry because oh, isn't it so much easier for them if all they have to do is step on the gas,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
How convenient. What an interesting coincidence.
Well, maybe when we get rid of Governor Trudeau, we can see some changes.
Yeah, his days are numbered, man.
It looks like it.
Yeah, his deputy prime minister, the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, stepped down from like well, I'm saying they got one shotted by Trump because Trump's been trolling them online, and basically he's using threats of tariffs to extract other concessions from the Canadian government for stuff they have not been governing very well on, and that caused a huge argument between Trudeau and his deputy. So she's out. This one guy who's been propping up the government in Parliament, Jagmeet Singh, is finally finding his cojones, and he's saying he's going to call for a confidence motion. The opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, with all this information, just wrote a letter to the Governor General, who's the King's representative in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
who has the power to force the Prime Minister to come back and face the music because Trudeau has tools at his disposal to keep putting this off until the clock runs out in October. But pressure is growing from places out of Trudeau's sphere of influence and ability to control to like have him leave earlier. So the next week or so is going to be interesting in Canadian politics. I think we might finally see the end of him. So
Yeah. Well, that'll be a plus. Getting rid of both the Obamas finally. So it was like ebony and ivory up around this bitch.
Yeah, well, they're representatives of a particular strain of like elite managerialism that's taken over the West, right? Like that they're just the two poster boys for this, and populism, whatever you might think of it, has had enough of
Hmm.
these types of people, and it's starting to, that inclination is starting to have effect.
Well, he can
I'm
walk in
hearing.
his dad's footsteps and go fuck up Cuba.
Yeah.
All
All
right,
right,
plug away,
Tommy.
my buddy.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Gord McGill. I write a Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com, where you can also find my own podcast, The Voice of Gord, which is also hosted on all of your, you know, podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple and Podverse and all the rest of them. Uh, Much like yourself, I discuss trucking and politics and whatever interests me. The last year or so, I've been really focused on this political prisoner situation in Canada. These guys that were arrested during the Freedom Convoy and unfairly detained for 2 years of their lives before trial. The trial was a sham. Their charges were a sham. And the whole thing is disgusting and an affront to a free society. That sort of took me off talking about trucking for a little while, but that's fine. So anyway, you can go check all that stuff at those locations.
All right. Well, and by the time this comes out, it's going to be after New Year. So I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Gord, y'all have a Merry Christmas and y'all have a Happy New Year. Enjoy your family, man.
Likewise, yeah, enjoy that lovely weather down in Louisiana while I go and shovel out from
Well,
looks
I'm
like
still in
80.
Texas, but as you see, the sun's coming up. So
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah,
it's
you're
right in my
close to the
face.
border.
Yeah, I'm right at the
Sorry, yeah.
border. Yeah, I'm close enough to Louisiana where you could call it Louisiana. It's like,
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go and dig out from under 8 inches of upstate New York snow.
yeah, I'm in northwest Louisiana or southeast Texas. Depends on how you want to look at it.
Swamp country.
Right. All right, brother. I'm going to
All
stop the
right,
recording.
peace.